Good morning, welcome. Good evening, wherever you are in the world. If you're, in some part in the United States, you probably have snow. So hopefully you get some time to enjoy the snow and the cold. My name is Brad Grady. I'm a principal analyst at Northern Sky Research, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by some great colleagues on an event sponsored and put together by Mission Microwave, which was founded in 2014 to create next generation solid state power amplifiers and block up converters that utilize advanced GaN transistors, unique power combining technologies, and novel full system designs to create the industry's most efficient, lightweight, and compact high power SSPAs. So today we're going to talk about trends and innovation in transportable Satcom ground terminals. We'll talk about kind of three major themes. We'll obviously talk about what's going on with COVID-19 and impacts in 2020. And then we'll focus on a conversation of changing of kind of a thought from moving from this antenna-centric kind of thought to a terminal and what that means across the value chain, the where and who is the customer, whether or not this is a US government play, international players, other types of things. And then new technologies that are coming online, LEOs, flat panel antennas, the introduction of virtualized network interfaces, all of these other kinds of great technologies and services that are being introduced. I'm joined by some great people. I have Tony Wilkie from AVL, Eric Clegg from L3 Harris, Victor Vega from Cubic Mission and Performance Solutions, and Clifford Marcy from Airbus DS Government Solutions. So I'd like to kind of bring everybody in to the conversation here. And Victor, maybe we'll start with you. And I just want to kind of get a couple of minutes intro of who you are, your company, and what 2020 really was for you. So Victor?
Yeah, hello, good morning, everybody. This is good morning on my side. Victor Vega with Cubic, and we're the makers of the Gator inflatable Satcom antenna. Have been for 10, 12 years. Worked with the company myself 10 of those years, and we've been making big aperture antennas that are inflatable, that are able to give you big performance in a small package. Where aperture matters for many years now. And in 2020, we kept doing that. We kept delivering to our customers, to our Army customers, to our Marine Corps customers, some international customers as well. And we continued to do that with a lot of manufacturing we do in Huntsville, Alabama. And that stayed open most of 2020, trying to deliver all those deliveries. Also, with given our innovation and our innovative staff, we even repurposed some of our inflation units within our antennas to do some prototype ventilators at a time where the country thought that we may have a shortage of ventilators. So we were able to kind of shift gears for a couple months there and do some of that, and then got back into making antennas again. So glad I'm here. Glad I'm able to share this floor with some of our industry in here, and also like to thank Mission Microwave. Over the years, we've been able to use smaller in package amplifiers with a much bigger performance out of them. Or when I started, a lot of that, when you wanted 50 to 100 watts, it needed to be on the ground maybe. Now we can put that right up on our feet and our antenna. So that's due to innovations like what Mission Microwave is doing.
Tony, your thoughts?
Yeah, so thank you, everyone, Brad, Satellite Innovation, and GVF for hosting this event. It's great, great venue. Not quite as good as in person, but let's take what we got, right? And also to Mission Microwave for sponsoring this event as well. They put a great panel together here. So my name's Tony Wilkie. I'm Senior Vice President, Corporate Sales at AVL Technologies. And for those of you who may not know much about AVL, we've been in business this is our 27th year, so we've been at it a while. We were founded by a gentleman named Jim Oliver, who I had the pleasure of working for early on in my career, and he recruited me up here to the mountains to hopefully finish off my career. But I've been in this industry since 1981. It's gone through a lot of changes, as you can imagine. But Jim started this company on a very innovative idea. At the time, transportable antennas were kind of limited to news gathering trucks. And he came up with this notion of using a cable drive positioner to help these news trucks lighten the load and create more space for the important equipment. So the cable drive enabled that. And, we still support the broadcast industry. You see a lot of our antennas on trucks to this day, but in recent years, there's been more of a focus on case-based equipment. And that all came about beginning in the early 2000s when a very important political figure who had his own communication agency here in the US decided he needed to reduce the staff that was required to set up these portable antennas. It took 6 or 8 people to carry the antenna whenever he traveled. And he felt like that was a waste of taxpayer money. So he urged his communication agency to find an alternative. And fortunately, they located Jim Oliver and described what they wanted. Jim put a case-based system together, and it had this unique thing called a one-button auto acquisition feature on it. So 1 or 2 people were required to set up these antennas after that. And that's really how we got started in that other part of transportable antennas. And 35,000 antennas later, we're still producing similar hardware here in our factory in the mountains of North Carolina. And in fact, a lot of those antennas that we've created went to one of the panelists here, his company, Eric Clay. But it's been a great opportunity for us, and we've got a lot of innovation that's going on right now at AVL, and we see a lot in the future, even including flat panel antennas. So I'll turn it over.
Eric, how about you?
Eric Clegg. I'm with the Satcom products division here at L3Harris. Probably better well known in the past as GCS. So we design, manufacture a wide range of VSATs from small flat panel terminals like the Darkwing and Shadow to our Panther 2 ManPack, which is a multi-aperture, multi-band, multi-modem, auto-acquire capable ManPack terminal, to our Hawkeye 3 range, which is 1.2 to 2.4 meters. These products are well known for being rugged, durable. We pride ourselves on being very flexible and adaptable with our product line, integrating lots of interesting advanced technology lately, like our Gatekeeper interference excision system. We're really excited to be part of L3Harris. This past year, with COVID has been challenging, but it's been successful. We made our deliveries in partnership with Mission and AVL, like Tony was mentioning. Doing a lot of recapitalization efforts, taking old terminals, updating them for new capabilities, and keeping those fleets serviceable for our customers. Being part of L3Harris has given us access actually to a pretty wide range of technology and investment that we didn't have before. So we're really excited on taking opportunities there and leveraging that into the future, particularly with protected modem development. And things like that. Appreciate Mission Microwave for sponsoring this, and looking forward to a good discussion.
Cool. Clifford?
Yes, hello, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Clifford Marcy, and I'm with Airbus Defense and Space Government Solutions. We're the US-based proxy company located in Plano, Texas. I am the Director of Solutions and Products for the organization. And we are known for our Ranger product line, which is a flyaway VSAT ranging from 1 meter all the way up to 2.4 meters, with renowned ruggedization, reliability, like some of the other colleagues mentioned, simplification of use. And one thing that is a big highlight nowadays is the interchangeability of components across a product line to make a family of systems. 2020, like everyone else mentioned, was an interesting year, definitely. We were fortunate to have a very successful year. Our sales were up 20% until, things happened with COVID. Things changed a little bit for the business. I think I saw most of you at the satellite show when everybody, immediately went home and we went into somewhat of a lockdown and the way of business changed. So some of the things that, we had to adjust to was connecting with each other, right? And how was that going to work with the departments and the organization as a whole, and then how to connect with our existing customers and potential customers. One highlight that we did achieve in 2020 is we were able to move into a state-of-the-art building in Plano, Texas, which actually helped us with some of the guidance that we had for social distancing and things like that with the production staff. So very, very exciting 2020, even with everything else that was going on with the world. Like everyone said, thank you very much to GVF, to you, Brad, for moderating this event, and to one of our favorite supply chain vendors there, Mission Microwave, for the invitation. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great transition to start talking about this conversation that I think has come on a lot lately, of moving from thinking of things like an antenna to a terminal. And I know that kind of definitional issue just seems kind of really stupid, to be honest, for a lot of us, because we've always thought of things as this holistic system. But I think just the change of nomenclature is really important to really emphasize the systems approach that a lot of folks are starting to take in acquiring new Satcom technologies. We all saw the kind of debacle with AHF and MEOS and other kind of government Satcom programs where terminals weren't necessarily matched up with space segment, and all the challenges and issues that brought up with that. So Eric, maybe I want to start with you. Talk a little bit about how you've advanced and L3Harris has kind of changed their mindsets in changing this kind of thinking of things as an antenna to moving towards a terminal and more of a holistic viewpoint in terms of the network operations and those kinds of things.
Sure. I mean, it was really a natural evolution for us. So I've been with the company about 14 years, and when I started, we were just getting into the VSAT world, and one of the big differentiators we had going all the way back to the beginning was our ViewSat GUI, which is a terminal control system that brings in amplifier, antenna, modem into one unified interface for the customer. So that's something that we've been developing all along, and these days it's even more important, because as you get into some of these managed services that rely on Open AMIP, Open BMIP, those universal protocols or standard protocols are great, but you really need a system to bring it all together and make it easy for the user, because when you bring in automation, you're moving complexity from one place to another. So you're taking complexity away from the user and you're putting it on the system, and it's really the software and the embedded controller that makes all that work and in a reliable, easy to use way. Open AMIP is like a dictionary, but it doesn't tell you how to build a sentence. And so it becomes the terminal manufacturer that brings all that together. So it's been a natural evolution, certainly challenging. I mean, our software department has grown significantly to deal with that. And I would expect that as time goes on, that'll more and more be the case.
Yeah, and Tony, maybe kind of your thoughts there. I mean, you mentioned, I think, a rightful use case of simplifying the deployment scenario of a lot of these terminals. Can you walk us through how that's evolved a little bit in terms of your thinking and in the technical complexity that goes into manufacturing and assembling all of these kinds of systems?
Yeah, thank you. So like I mentioned early on, we were strictly kind of an antenna oriented company here at AVL, and we still pretty much are, but as things have gotten more complex and there's been more of a desire to simplify the antenna and terminal operation for the user, we've had to work together with our partners, both customers and suppliers, to figure out how to do that so that a relatively untrained person can pull a terminal out of a closet and through basic instruction, get it together and figure out how to point it without having to read a lot of manuals and go through a lot of training. So there's a lot more sophistication in that terminal than people realize, and that's to credit people on this panel and our suppliers and partners. That's really been the big challenge, is to make it easy. We have one large program we supported that basically had logisticians who were having to operate the terminal. These guys were, barely barely trained in satellite communication. So the best way to do that is to give them a green button they can push, and then everything kind of takes off from there. But yeah, it's been a big transition enabled by a lot of breakthroughs in technology, especially cell phone, micro components that allow you to determine where that terminal is on the Earth, and then figure out where to point it without a lot of effort for the operator.
Yeah, and Victor, not to be stereotypical, but you guys always have the big beach balls, and that always seems like a really cool, easy to use antenna. So maybe walk us through how you've evolved thinking of kind of this systems approach to terminal manufacturing.
Yeah, no problem. So the company, was the Gator product line was founded as a company initially with the antenna in mind. That was the technology. That was kind of our intellectual property. And that came from some space-based applications of inflatable structures in space and solar concentrators, et cetera. But quickly, the company, as it got formed, had to think into terminals and then into systems from there. And what I mean by that is, when the company founded, it was materials engineers, kind of maybe some RF antenna type engineers, very focused on the antenna itself. When you go out and start talking to customers, and your customer says, you quickly realize that they want a terminal, not just an antenna. So it also depends, who your customer is. I like the relationship that AVL has with L3 and others, and to be able to integrate terminals within us. We were the ones providing the antenna itself. So within our own group, we had to quickly transition to thinking terminals. What feeds are we going to put on it? What amplifiers, et cetera. And then over time, as customer demands have become more specific, and also giving us more leeway to think on our own. And what I mean by that is even our customers are changing in the way they acquire, where before you may have a requirements document that told you specific antenna gains or even terminal ERPs and GONTs, right? And, as an antenna engineer, you can quickly say, yep, we can do that. Now you're seeing requirements and requests from customers that are just saying data rates, and I know for all Satcom engineers, the moment someone asks you, hey, give me an antenna that can give me this data rate, in your mind, you're like, oh my gosh, how many parameters, am I still missing to give you that answer? But as a company, we have to change and start thinking that way. Because to Tony's point, Satcom's becoming more available to many other users. So it's not just your comms operator, your signal officers. It's now everyone's trying to use Satcom that deploys, and especially in our field, everyone here from Airbus, L3 Harris, myself here at Cubic, our customers are still tactical, still expeditionary, but they want to spread that Satcom to all different users, from logistics to maintenance, motor pool stuff, garrison operations. And when you do that, your user experience has to change, because it's not just quote unquote experienced communications operators using it. It's someone off the street, for lack of a better word, right? Someone with little communications experience, right? You may have, when I worked some stuff with FEMA, it was the IT comms person, doing the Satcom, and they know the networking and they know the IP stuff from the back, but may have never set up a Satcom antenna in the past. So as a company, you have to start thinking past the antenna. The antenna is just a piece, and then that's led us to doing custom feeds and things from just before acquiring off the shelf feeds, and also integrating modems. There was a time that the customer just wanted the antenna, and they're like, hey, we got the modem, don't worry about it, right? Well, now you're getting into customers wanting systems and wanting even, we're going to talk about it later, wanting services. So now your modem is part of your offering and your whole user experience. So that's changed over the years. It's been kind of in my opinion, fun to do it. You try to get a more systems engineering approach to how you think about your product line, versus just focusing on just the antenna.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that really highlights the evolution of thinking that folks have that are kind of buying these systems, right? They go from, I need X X this, X that, X Y, and like I need 10 megabits, right? And they don't care how the soup is made. They don't care what goes into it. It's like, just give me 10 megabits, and tell me how, what button to push, where to do it, and if it breaks, how to fix it. So Clifford, how about you folks over at Airbus? How are you approaching this evolution of thinking from, the bits and pieces to more of a systems integration approach?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? And it's something that we continuously talk about, ways to improve the product line, because we produce a terminal, right? We get an antenna, we get, components for feed systems, we get modems, we get all those things, and we package that into a terminal. So one of the things we're always trying to do is ensure that terminal that we're manufacturing and deliver to the customer is as easy as it can be to operate and to maintain and to sustain from a terminal perspective. One of the things that we've noticed here recently is more of a holistic approach, right? And that gets to what you're mentioning about the terminal and what we'll talk about with Satcom as a service, right? It used to be that folks would go out, and it's been mentioned, go buy an antenna, right? Then they would go buy a modem platform, right? Then they would go buy some satellite capacity, and then they would try and knuck all that together and have a point-to-point Satcom link, or even a mesh link if they wanted to go that far. So we're seeing more of a holistic approach. One of the big things over the past 3 years has been kind of the transition from the rack-based modem, right? The modem that sits in the 19-inch rack, to a modem that's integrated with a terminal in some sort of outdoor unit enclosure, things like that, which all helps with the reduction of the packaging of the terminal and get some of that size, weight, and power reduced for terminal manufacturers. So those are some of the big things we've seen, right? Always lighter, faster, smaller, but really a different approach to how I'm buying a Satcom terminal by just buying a Satcom antenna.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would say we're getting lots of questions and chats we're getting lots of interaction on the chat. If you have a question to ask, please use the Q&A feature. That's one of the Q&A buttons on the Zoom interface. So we can kind of post it live and we can all ask it. And Victor, I saw you marked one question live, so we'll go to that really quickly. And the question is really about the impact of systems design and waveform all the way upstream, back to the terminal design. So in the antenna, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so kind of how I mentioned a little earlier, there was a decade ago where customers just said, hey, we provide a modem, just give me the antenna, or give me the terminal kind of thing. And that's quickly changed from what the person's asking with regards to, now they're saying, hey, we want the modem, or we want the waveform, really. Hey, this is the waveform we're getting into, provide it with it. I would add to that also waveform flexibility is another thing that as antenna and terminal and now systems providers, that evolution we've all done, we have to think about, because it's no longer, with certain customer sets, it's no longer, I just need this one waveform. It's, I need 3 or 4 of them. And as a terminal provider, you got to think of, all right, how do I make sure that the user experience is common along those waveforms if you want them, to use your terminal? Because, all of us have been in that situation where, we take that support call and we know that, the problem's in the waveform or the modem, but that's not what the user's thinking, right? The user's thinking the problem's in your terminal. So you have to think about your now your waveform and your modem integration as part of your offering versus just looking at it as some third-party thing. And several of us have done it from integrating the modems physically into our terminals, snapping them in, slots that they slide in. But also now the demand from the customer is that, hey, I want to be able to operate in 3-4 different waveforms seamlessly through either the push of a button or, now you're talking about software defined, radios, et cetera, which is also something that as an industry, in my opinion, 2 things. Either one, we'll have to start collaborating a little more with some of the waveform providers, which we don't have them on the panel necessarily right now, to say, hey, can we host your waveforms in one piece of hardware? Because this is the way that customers are wanting it, instead of having to carry 3-4 different modems with them. Or as an industry, do a little bit more like the cell phone industry has done to, international standards and certain standards, let's say the GSM type standards, where, as providers of terminals or even modems, we can all do our own thing, but still work towards a standard. Now that's a much bigger question, and that's a bigger question that's not just about us, the terminal providers, but also the satellite providers, the satellite makers, the network, the people setting up the networks and the gateways.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that really does get to one of the other questions that came through the chat. So Paul and Dan and Gary, please use the Q&A feature, but I'll ask some questions here. So Paul asked a really great question that I think gets to one of the core, maybe not core, but illustrates, I think, a lot of this transition of thinking from an antenna to a terminal. And he asked, with all the single button acquire systems, are you using GPS or other PNT sources? And have you assessed operations in a modern day GPS denied spoofed environment? And that, I think, is a huge key new criteria that Space Force and all the other US government acronyms are talking about, of operating in a denied environment. So Eric, maybe we'll start with you. And you mentioned OpenAMAP, and kind of that's a dictionary. It doesn't tell you how to build a sentence. So how are you thinking of operating in kind of a GPS denied environment for these kind of simplistic operations of push, go, connect?
Sure. That's been an issue for our customers for a long time now. We do support M-code, Dagger, various devices that will allow the customers to operate. On the protected side, it's an interesting thing. We just last year launched our Gatekeeper interference excision capability, which is embedded into the terminals. It removes receive side co-channel interference, which is a big thing for a lot of our users that really they depend on a commercial modem platform. So protection is not something that necessarily is inherently built into the waveforms that they're using. So that's something that we've added. And then looking out into the future, we mentioned waveforms and modems. So as part of L3Harris, we are one of the two folks working on PTW A3M modem, and it'll be interesting to see how that evolves, because it's difficult to combine all the various things that customers want out there: high data rates, low latency, protection. We're looking at how we can take all those things and kind of bring them into our terminal family. So you have a toolbox for the customer that has all the capability that they need.
Yeah, and Tony, maybe I'll add in another layer of questions. So Gary asks, with all of the focus on user friendliness, et cetera, I mean, sometimes things do break and you kind of still need to fix it. But what is industry doing to advocate for increased technical training with end users to make better use of the equipment?
Well, that's a really good question. And one of the things that we strive for at AVL is to make sure customers know how to not just operate, but troubleshoot and maintain their equipment. It's becoming a real challenge, because once you get beyond the first layer, these things are really sophisticated, highly integrated pieces of equipment. So if you want to have someone trained on every item, that's pretty intensive. But what we do offer, and most people on this panel work for companies to offer this, is a kind of an enhanced level of customer service. So I can speak for AVL, most of our guys have been to modem training. They've been to buck training. And if they've got an operator who isn't maybe that versed in that, those detailed pieces of equipment, we've got guys typically on these phone calls any hour of the day who can answer a lot of their questions and help them drill down and troubleshoot what may be the problem. So that's one way we handle it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's one of those things that's kind of an understood or misunderstood or misconceived, that, hey, just because it's like a thing that you can touch, it's simple and easy. And, once you kind of get past that push button go, you start to go into these, very long lists. They're like, cars these days, right? You can't just turn a screwdriver and fix it. You got to plug in and diagnose things. And Clifford, I want to focus, a little bit on you in that same theme of, how are you focused on kind of improving user training, operating in denied environments, and maybe talk a little bit about your standards and processes that you're seeing as kind of, key ingredients to building this, terminal, so to say.
Yeah, so start off with the training and support and things like that. Just like Tony over at AVL, we have that same sort of construct, right? We've got personnel experts, if you will, that have training and everything that deals with a Ranger product line, from bucks to modems and to the overall system. One of the things that we learned in 2020 was training resources that were available, right? We were not able to go and actually visit with customers and actually provide the level of training that they were requiring. So we had to come up with ways that we actually could do that remotely. Everything from a Zoom or a GoToMeeting to a live stream of interaction, kind of how we're doing with this roundtable, to train those personnel on how to use the system. We also have numerous resources, from videos that show setup. We've got online training, and then just the typical PowerPoint presentation training mechanism. So training for us has always been a big thing, right? We always want that user experience to be good from the time they open up that transit case to the time they close that transit case up. And one of the ways we've been able to do that is to simplify everything that the user actually touches, right? Simplify the integrated feed, simplify the ODU, the interfaces in the ODU, kind of just make that user experience simplified all around. Lots of talk and lots of discussion on kind of this contested communications environment that we've been talking about for a couple of years now. Everything from PNT, right? What happens in that denied environment if a system requires GPS? For a majority of our customers, they're manual antennas. So you could override a GPS to do the calculation for the look angle to point the antenna. Really, it comes into the modem and whether or not the modem requires kind of that live string of GPS feed to get into the network and things like that. But we've worked with users on alternate sources for GPS information. We also support everything like Eric mentioned with the Dagger and kind of all of that anti-spoof GPS that's out there. That's kind of where we stand with that. But lots of discussion in kind of this CCE environment of frequency resiliency, multiple waveforms. How do I quickly move from one waveform if I'm noticing I'm being jammed to another waveform, and just the adaptability of that from a user perspective with a terminal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have another kind of great audience question that I think kind of starts to transition into our kind of next set of moving thoughts from kind of, we recognize that the antenna is more than one thing, but here's a great capstone question. So all devices have their limitations within a system. What is your theory on integration where one component can partially overcome other component challenges to enhance the system collectively? So bringing that systems design approach, and this kind of rounds out our first block. So Eric, I don't know if we want to start with you of how do you kind of balance those trades of pros and cons and pluses and minuses to bring kind of a best fit solution to customer needs?
Sure. Probably the biggest trade-off is on the antenna side. Everybody would love to have the gain of a 2.4 meter parabolic, but that doesn't fit every mission. So there's certainly a balancing act between swap and having a broad range of products. The flat panel terminals we have, they're designed primarily for GEO HTS services right now. Obviously looking at going to LEO and MEO in the future, but there's magic in those panels, but they still don't have a ton of gain, and that really ties to the type of service they're using in space. So with the advancements on the space side, that's allowed us to shrink the size of the terminals. Of course, at the same time, our customers' data needs have grown. That's why, you wouldn't necessarily think it, but we've sold a larger number of 2.4 meter terminals in the past couple of years than we have in the past. And that's driven by customers wanting to close larger links. So there's always that trade-off. It would be great. We see a lot of ESAs coming out, and we're certainly looking at how we can integrate them into our product line. But to have an ESA that works on LEO and GEO and still is relatively affordable is a tough thing. And you can only put so much into a small panel there before you start having power issues and things like that. One concern that people don't necessarily think about a lot, especially when it comes to the ESAs, is how power hungry they can be. So, okay, yeah, you got an ESA here, but is it really useful in an expeditionary manpack if it uses 1,000 watts? So there's a lot that goes into the trade-offs there.
Victor, I guess the same question over to you of that. And you mentioned, I think, right at the top of the bat of this kind of changing form factors on the terminal, on the component side, enabling, better performance, same kind of ultimate kit that goes in the back of the vehicle. What is your view on the kind of those pros cons trade-offs?
Yeah. So I think the question was in regards to maybe the way I translated failovers and redundancies and all that stuff. We as engineers, and when I used to work on airplane stuff, redundancy and everything was key, because you don't want to fall out of the sky kind of thing. But when you have a terminal, and especially when you have an expeditionary terminal, you can't put too many redundancies, because then you end up, you're carrying two amplifiers or multiple, components or whatever, right? Even if you have it built in and failover. So you have to kind of, design your terminal around components that are able to last out in the field. But the key would be back to user friendliness too, is being able to replace those components quickly as well, because parts fail. And if you're, let's say, we've taken the approach where your LMBs and amplifiers are user replaceable, where you can, take down your feed or your antenna, or not even take it down right there while it's installed, change one out. We have, customer sets that really like that. And then depending on who your customer is, you may want that to be a little bit more difficult or easier. If you have kind of a more general purpose user, maybe you don't want them messing around with that, but it's easy enough that if it goes back to the maintenance facility, their maintenance facility, they can do it. So that's kind of the approach we've taken on a lot of that component stuff. Back to where I talked about, integrating multiple waveforms, and even as we're all looking at, multiple bands, which we all do right now, is, how quickly can a terminal be multi-constellation or multi-band, where, if one network goes down, or if your components go down, it kicks over and uses another satellite, or it uses another network. A lot of that can be started to work into the terminals. Is things we're looking into. And some of the challenges with that, though, are other network pieces, right? And going from one network to the other. It's not like in Satcom yet. You can roam like a cell phone from one tower to the other. But I'm sure that there's plenty of customers that's exactly what they would want to do. Whether it's with a parabolic that swings over to the next satellite, or as Eric was saying, with some ESAs that could just swing an electronic beam over from one satellite to the other, not just within the orbiting satellite, but within constellations or even networks.
Yeah, no, Tony, and I think this kind of, brings you into the conversation too, as well, of, how do you start to do that analysis of picking, terminals and components against waveforms, against standards and training, and all those kinds of components, and what are you guys thinking about that over there at AVL?
Well, what you're talking about is a huge challenge for all of us in the industry, because more and more, these users want a Swiss Army knife. If something isn't operating quite correctly, or if they're in a denied environment, they want to be able to quickly switch over to another option. And to give you more of an extreme example of that, we have customers who have enjoyed limited motion geo-transportable antennas for years. And now that they know that we've got our feet wet in a MEO constellation, they want to know if they can add that capability to their terminal. And most of that is not so much as to avoid component failures or change of modems, but just to give them another option in a denied environment. And that's a challenge, because it's going to be expensive. It's going to require carrying around that much more equipment. But that's kind of where we're spending a lot of our time right now, is to give users, customers, all these different options, so that they're always able to communicate, because a lot of these terminals are in pretty tough environments and they need to operate.
Mm-hmm. And Clifford, just to kind of round out the conversation, I guess I'm curious to see how you're looking at it from Airbus. I mean, Airbus, huge company, right? You have lots of resources within your capability set, and Skynet and all that other kind of stuff on the other side of the house. How are you looking at solving this, kind of optimizing for the right solution?
Yeah, it's it's an interesting thing, right? It goes back to what Tony mentioned with the Swiss Army knife, right? How do we make, a terminal, either multi-constellation or be able to adapt quickly to emerging technology, right? One of the things that we've noticed is there's, a lot of customers that have systems, right? And they don't have funds to go and buy a completely new system. So there's been a lot of questions about, how could we upgrade the Ranger product line to go onto an HTS constellation? How could we upgrade our existing Ranger product line to go into a MEO constellation? So how can we recapitalize what we already have spent money on with just a simple upgrade? And that goes all the way into the waveforms and things like that. Everyone wants a smaller, lighter terminal with the same capability, if you will. But as you start to reduce that, there's trade-offs like was mentioned. One of the things that, I've got to mention is that, the innovation that Mission Microwave has done with amplifiers is enabled, all of us to reduce swap significantly, right? So, we're able to get that same linear power out of a smaller package, which then in turn reduces the terminal manufacturer's pack out, right? But the end user still has the same capability from an ERB. So that is huge, right? When we start to look at reduction of size and things like that and how we kind of enhance what's already out there. And then just to finish this up is the maintenance aspect or the replaceability if something fails, right? I think it's very important from a user's perspective to be able to very quickly, have that mean time to repair very, very low. So if it's, 4 screws, I take something off, I put something on and we're good to go. Or if I swap out a feed, whatever that is very, very important in kind of how we're doing business, if you will, with satellite communications nowadays.
Yeah, no, and I think this is also, great segue to thank Mission Microwave. Or kind of, sorry, wrong hand, up here on my screen. It's really great, Steve, and all the folks over there put this panel together, and it's a really great topic. I think with the lots of questions we're getting, lots of people that are on the line, lots of text messages I'm getting offline. My phone's kind of lit up here, so I apologize. It's really a hot topic.
Today's roundtable event is sponsored by Mission Microwave. The company provides X, Ku, and Ka band solid-state amplifiers and block-up converters for leading Satcom terminal and gateway manufacturers. Mission's product line covers 12 to 400 watt high-power solutions and includes products for LEO, MEO, and GEO satellite ground stations.
I think this is a good segue to transition into kind of our second block of questions, which is focused on what's next. And one of these is the business and engagement model, which we've talked on the technical side of, hey, things are becoming more complex. We need that Swiss Army knife, that silver bullet of terminals. Now, do we need a Swiss Army knife or Swiss silver bullet engagement model? And who are we engaging with? And then that last conversation, kind of in the last couple of minutes of our panel of flat panels, we've talked about that. LEOs, we've talked about that, but we'll do that. But I want to start off with one question from Ted here, and I'm not going to try to say Ted's last name. I'm sorry, Ted. But he says, I think diverse is also obtained these days by being able to operate across LEO, MEOs, et cetera. Are your clients asking you to add that capability to their existing terminals if possible to support these new fast-moving payloads? I think Tony mentioned that a little bit. Victor, maybe we'll start with you, and you could kind of walk us through how you're integrating these new systems into your kind of portfolio.
So are they asking? Yes, but it goes out to the Swiss Army knife, right? I like customers asking and pushing the envelope on a lot of this stuff because then it makes you rethink how you can either repurpose something to Cliff's point, right? You want to, repurpose maybe what you've already invested in as well as innovate something new. So, but one of the things that, as an industry, we're trying to also look is, what tool is right for what job, right? To Eric's point earlier, right? Aperture is still going to matter for a while. As satellite technology improves, then, your terminals change as well. But there's still, the physics behind the aperture and having a bigger aperture antenna and closing links at edge of networks and being able to, have a bigger gain and with less power, et cetera. All that stuff is the physics of Satcom, and all that's still going to come into play. So where I'm going with that is that we're thinking through how does a parabolic fit into a world where everybody's enamored with LEOs and flat panels. And the answer to me is it still fits. And then it becomes your user case. To Tony's point earlier, where he said, hey, you've got more people using Satcom, logisticians and other stuff. Where I see is that I don't necessarily maybe see that the market for parabolics necessarily plummets completely. It's more of now you've got more people using Satcom, and more types of users are going to need different things. So your common user, your flat panel, your ESA, it's the reason where you can have a flat panel on your SUV, in the future, right? Because me as a dad driving down the street with my kids is not going to want to set up a Satcom antenna, even though I can, right? I just want to turn on my car, and there it is, right? So now you're broadening your use case and your users. So that's where I think a lot of the technologies are going to start fitting in with different use cases. So in reality, the Satcom market kind of grows. And then someone asked a question or made a comment, how does 5G and all that stuff potentially affect our market? I think it becomes more integration. For years, those two markets have been separate. And as the conversations that are already going on, Satcom and 5G and the combination of those things and everything. And as companies, we got to start thinking about those integrations and also the flexibility of terminals to be able to switch from one network to the other and all that. One last thing I'll add with that is someone made a comment about, like modular components and things to help dictate performance, and you're going to get into this, but when we're talking about going from antenna makers to terminal providers to systems, right, to now being more integrated with the service provider, I would also add that as an industry, we need to look at certification processes, right? One of the reasons a lot of times we can't offer as much modularity, let's say, with our amplifiers and things like that, is because a lot of the certifications, specifically maybe in the military with RSTRAT WGS, right, it's tied to your configuration. It's not tied to a performance of a terminal, maybe like the FCC does, that says, hey, you're a 2.4 meter and you can transmit up to this much power. RSTRAT stuff are like, no, you have to use that specific amplifier and that specific timing source, et cetera. So it kind of limits a little bit of our innovation to say, hey, here's a box of different, modular components you can use. So I think that's even going to be more important as we try to make terminals that are multi-constellation, multi-band, multi-networks. When we're now working with, let's say, Intelsat Flex or MRSat Global Express, or even Viasat and even some of the RSTRAT stuff, is how can we make those certifications where they're not so tied to a very specific component configuration. And I think that would enable innovation from all of us to say, hey, every year we're putting out something new without a huge recertification process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Eric, I think this kind of gets into kind of your area, focusing on, standard systems, those sorts of things. So I'm curious, how is, L3Harris approaching this, maybe jump from going from kind of the antenna terminal to systems integrator or service provider? How are you guys focusing on that conversation with your customers?
Sure. I think the biggest thing for us, when you're talking about Satcom as a service, is, what is the network that the customers are ultimately needing to connect back into? Because, it's sometimes they need more than just a commercial transport. And we have a number of projects really across the company, not just in our division here, that are looking to solve those problems. Just for example, you bring up 5G, LEO, MEO. So if you're talking in an expeditionary terminal, you're probably not going to be able to access every service, from a very small integrated package. You may need a terminal for LEO, or maybe an antenna package for LEO to go along with your GEO system. And we have ways that we can bond those together through a device called a tag that we've done some demonstrations with, that will actually allow customers to route through the cloud, essentially to connect multiple networks together on the backside. We think that's going to be a big part of the Satcom as a service, because it will allow customers to use diverse transport networks, but ultimately get back to what they need to connect into, and take away having to really build out the physical infrastructure that would require in the past.
Yeah, Tony, I think this really gets to a great question that Charlie asked. Is managed Satcom services with terminals as a service doable from a government and industry perspective? So we'll start with you. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think it's very doable. I don't have a lot of experience on the satellite operator level, but I see the huge benefit to the military of having someone just take care of all the headaches. Just let the experts take care of it. Because I think I've got to believe, even though the government has some really super satellites like the WGS constellation, they probably have limitations that a commercial operator would not have, and they may not have as robust a satellite constellation as some of these newer commercial enterprises have. So I think from that perspective, it's got a lot of promise, but we'll see what happens. There is a lot of interest out there. I see some RFIs floating around about satellite as a service. From an antenna perspective, where we kind of focus our attention, it shouldn't impact us that much whether it's complete service or not. But we do have to be more aware of what the satellite operator is dealing with if it does go that route.
And Clifford, I'm kind of curious how you're seeing that evolution.
Yeah, lots of interest in Satcom as a service. Do I think it's a viable solution? Yes, for every requirement that's out there that potentially the DoD or international customers may have. Maybe not, right? And I think it ties back to what is it that the customer desires from a terminal and an end-to-end solution. Some of the concern I have with Satcom as a service would be what type of committed information rates, right? Quality of service, right? Where is that information landing, right? Do we have any issues from a security perspective, right? Are we tunneling that traffic? How is it then getting back to wherever it is that last mile communications person, right? In that expeditionary and austere environment is connecting to, right? Is that information essentially safe all the way through? But I think it's doable, and from a terminal provider, right? We embrace that. If that's where industry is going, we're all for it, and we want to be involved with that. But we also want to understand truly from a customer requirements perspective, are they still going to need a WGS certified terminal? Are they going to need the ability to go on to HTS, right? And then as we start to talk about these other non-geo constellations and roll that in there, just kind of that one terminal fits all, I don't think that's a doable thing. So it's probably going to end up where they may have multiple solutions based on the requirements they're trying to meet or that mission that they're trying to meet.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully our audio isn't dropping out, Philip. I'm sorry. But Victor, I want to bring you in here and maybe ask the obvious question of what's the service and how are you thinking about solving that?
Yeah, so first is the managed service piece, which some of that stuff exists, right now, and I think all of us have gotten or are getting terminals certified and certain commercial managed services, right? And then as a technologist and someone that likes kind of a full integration of options for a user. It's kind of neat to go to a satellite provider and then you kind of have your choices of terminals based on your use case, which I mentioned use case before, where you're not just tied to one. Like if you want to go mobile, hey, here's your flat panel on top of your vehicle, right? But if you really need a little bit more robust, higher gain, use, then here's your 2.4 meter parabolic that all goes into the same network. It's kind of, I look at it as when I walk into the cell phone store, I have my choices of cell phones, right? I can buy whichever one I want. They all work on the network. So from a user perspective, I see that as a positive versus thinking the other way around right now, which is you pick your terminal and then you got to go find your service. Now it does shift for some of us. It shifts, call it the acquisition power. where we're working with customers, DoD, right, where today they acquire the terminal based on a set of requirements and specs, and then they've already got the network mostly figured out. This could shift where acquisition becomes the satellite providers are the ones that are now the primes, because it's all coming through them. And now as terminal providers, our customer becomes a satellite provider that's providing the Satcom service, unless we shift to provide all that together, which we can as well. And we're looking into it, because some of those satellite providers may not want to be that DoD prime, because one of the things we all got to think about is they're all great ideas. And as Tony said, our US DoD customer at least is already thinking about it. They're putting out RFIs, they're putting out feelers. They've talked about it in their capability sets. The Space Force has put it out in their Satcom vision, or the fighting Satcom that they call it. They've been calling it. So they're thinking about it, but it is an acquisition challenge, a mindset change, really. And I hope that our customers, and continue to involve us in figuring that out. And I think that's why you see a lot of RFIs. They're trying to figure out, how do we do this? Because the acquisition models, at least in the US, are not necessarily set up to think of Satcom as a service, right? These kind of subscription type services and things like that. Now, the good news is that there's other parts of US DoD that are doing subscription type things and service type stuff. So it's not there's some precedents. We just got to help our customers do that in the Satcom world, whether they do it through us or we work with service providers as partners.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so we've got about 4 minutes left. So I kind of want to round it up. But if people that are on the line, there's still a couple hundred of you. If you do have questions, type them in. They will get answered. We'll kind of put them in the description below in the video when it gets posted online. But some really great questions that are very, very technical that we would spend all day talking about. But I want to kind of wrap up with combine a couple of questions. We've talked about 5G. We've talked about all these kinds of things, but kind of directly related to this conversation, two big things. One is, I think, how is the transportable antenna scenario changing? Well, be it from parabolic to flat panel, and how is that kind of conversation evolving from the evolution of wide beam to GEO, HTS to LEO? So Tony, maybe we'll start with you. Take a minute and kind of let me know what you think.
Well, I have been party to some of the briefings that are going around in the DoD space, which is where we focus a lot of our energy. And in every one of those briefings is pretty clear that the future vision is to take advantage of all those constellations, GEO, MEO, and LEO, because they all have their own benefits. And they also provide the kind of versatility and ability to take care of disadvantaged or challenged environments that they'll be operating in. So from that perspective, I think the parabolic offers huge advantages because for one, flat panels are they do have power issues and they also have bandwidth issues. Parabolic antenna, as most of the panelists here have alluded to, you can change the frequency band on a parabolic antenna pretty quickly. Most of us have a feed RF module that can be interchanged pretty quickly. So that's tough for a flat panel solution to give you that kind of range. But I think it's going to be a combination of parabolics, flat panels, GEO, LEO, MEO. Fortunately, I think those are the visions that are out that I'm seeing out there anyway.
Yeah, I think the world's getting more complex kind of as we evolve. Clifford, I'm curious to get your thoughts on that evolution of, the acronym soup of GEO, MEO, FBA, parabolic.
Yeah, the multi-constellation, multi-terminal that supports all.
Yes.
I think what we're realizing, years ago, right, we thought that we'd be able to do everything on a GEO constellation, right? So we wanted an on-the-move antenna. We'll just throw it on a GEO constellation. We'll make a parabolic antenna, and that'll be your on-the-move solution. And then, the feedback from the user community was, well, I can't put a large 24-inch, 20-inch antenna on top of a Humvee and have a low signature, low visibility, right? I need something that hugs that roof line and provides me that connectivity. So like Tony alluded to, what I think you'll see is, because we require the frequency resiliency, right? We're going to need that, right? We're going to need the ability to have multiple ways to communicate. But what you're going to see is GEO will probably stay with a parabolic, which is great, right? You'll have a MEO constellation in terminals that will be used for, maybe high data rate backhaul stuff. So, ISR things that need to be reached back into a data center for some sort of AI capability or things like that. And then I think with LEO, what you're going to see is anyone that requires mobility, right? So an on-the-move solution, something actually on a warfighter walking around the battle space and communicating back. I think you'll see as multiple solutions that kind of get after that frequency resiliency. So not a one terminal fits all, but a multitude of terminals that provide you the capability that you require as an end user.
Yeah, Eric, and I want to kind of get your thoughts here. I think we're all kind of coalescing around this theme that it's the optimal solution for the optimal use case, and it's not necessarily one solution for every use case. But I'm curious to get your thoughts.
And what makes it more complex, what we talked about way back in the beginning is taking that and handing it to a user and making it easy, because it's one thing to change frequency bands, but now you're changing modem waveforms, satellite orbits, a number of parameters. And if you really look at delivering products to not Satcom people, it's challenging. So the way we envision addressing it is really having a family of terminals with a common user interface that are adaptable to these different orbits, waveforms, what have you. So, I mean, even if you look at the Starlink terminal, has a steerable ESA, still needs to be aligned. So there's a motorization component in it. So our Manpack terminal is auto acquire. It has the nuts and bolts required to align an ESA that you would need for a LEO constellation, or track a MEO, what have you. So, we envision modular components that you can fit into our product line on a single platform. So you have a customer invest in a platform, that platform's adaptable to all these future technologies that are required as they come out. From the antenna down to the modem, even the internal modem work that we're doing in L3 Harris, to have a software-defined modem that supports waveforms that you need for these different constellations, because it's not just the satellites, they all use different waveforms, different frequency bands. So modularity is key, and then having the software to make it all work seamlessly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Eric, kind of last words. Or Victor, sorry, Victor. Last words.
Yeah.
Freudian slip there.
Eric hit it right on the dot. It's the family of terminals. To be able to have a family that supports all the use cases. As a comparison, right? The tablet never killed the laptop, and the laptop never killed the desktop, even though that technology continues to try to do that. But there's a use case for all of those. People are still using desktops, people are still using laptops, and we're still using tablets or cell phones for that matter. Yeah. So there's a uses for those. The companies that do those, they have a family of products, and that's where I see Satcom going. That there'll be more of a family of products. And for me, that's options for the user, because now you can do more missions. You're not just cornered to the mission that can only give you a 2.4 meter parabolic. You can go sub 1 meter, 1.2 meter. You can do flat panel, and now you have options to be able to do multiple missions using Satcom. So, for me, that's exciting. That's something I welcome. I welcome some of the new players in the Satcom industry with flat panels. It makes us all think new and innovative. But it also, I think, for the user, will also improve the stuff we offer as well. From improving our parabolics to giving the users new products, solutions such as panels or anything else that may come in the future.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's been a great conversation. I know we ran a few minutes over, so I apologize to everybody, but it's really been great. I want to thank again Mission Microwave over here. I got it right this time. So they have some really cool products. They're kind of like the folks that are known for the round buck is the way it's always described, and I always describe them. But check out their website. They got some great stuff, and it's really been very interesting to have everybody here. So stay tuned. March 4th, 10 a.m. Eastern, my time. I will not be moderating that one, although I moderated the last two. GVF and Satellite Evolution are hosting another session, another webinar, and another great series of conversations called Satellite Systems Optimization, the Next Frontier in Size, Weight, and Power. You can kind of sense that this is the year of the ground terminal and Transier. But I want to thank all the panelists. I'd like to thank everybody that's involved. If you had a question, we will answer it down below in the description. So stay tuned and be sure to follow us all on LinkedIn and Twitter and everything. Have a good day.